Radio Komunitas Balai Budaya Minomartani. Radio Budaya, Radio Warga, Radio Kita Bersama.
Dari Komplek Balai Budaya Minomartani, Ngaglik, Sleman. Inilah Radio BBM. Jaringan Radio Komunitas Yogyakarta.
Community Radio BBM FM, Creation for Nation.
Radio Komunitas BBM FM, dukunglah budaya Indonesia.
Selamat sore warga budaya, which is Bahasa Indonesian for good afternoon cultural citizens. My name is Melike, and I'm your host for the program Globgal Chain, where we come together each Wednesday to discuss different cultural aspects of my experiences in Europe. I'm an intern at UGM from Utrecht University in the Netherlands, where I have lived for the past 5 years. Before that, I lived in Denmark, where I'm from and raised. But that's not all it. My roots are Turkish, and altogether that makes me the cultural cocktail that I am today. Today's broadcast is about education and how it might need to change to reflect our ever-changing society. And I'm very excited to present to you someone who studies educational sciences at Utrecht University. This person is extremely driven to make education better, and she has made it her life goal to maximize learning potential of students. She has 12 years of professional experience as a teacher in English at a vocational college, and she is very ambitious, reflexive, and eager to continuously learn and develop. She's someone that I got to know during an honor program called Young Innovators, which has a very different way of practicing education. Please welcome Hanya. Hi, Hanya, and welcome to the show. And thank you for joining the broadcast. How are you?
Thank you for being here and inviting me. I'm good. Thank you.
So, Hanya, let's just dive right into the questions, if you're ready for that.
I'm ready.
The first question is, what is your motivation for studying and working in the field of education?
Well, for now, my motivation is the drive to make education better.
Okay.
Not only in terms of good education, but also empowering teachers to really spark the interest of their students and making sure that they maximize the learning potential of their students.
Okay. Okay. And why is that important to you, but also to society, maximizing learning potential?
Well, it's kind of my mission now to make sure that every student has good education.
Mm-hmm.
After teaching for 12 years as an English as a second language teacher,
Mm-hmm.
I had this urge to get into like what happens, the deductive way. So
Mm-hmm.
how can education better? Because students change, society changes. So we can't just teach like we did 12 years ago. So we have to make sure we're up to date with, what drives our students to learn and how do they learn.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that every student has the right to be uplifted and to be seen in class. And I think it's up to us and teachers to make sure they, get that belief in themselves and the faith and the trust that they can, that they can and are able to achieve success, however small the success is.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that, well, time obviously changes, society changes, students change, and you said, well, can I just continue doing it how we've always done it? And what do you mean with that? What has changed? And yeah, what has changed for the education to change as well?
I think if you take a look at the technology available nowadays,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of distraction for students, like 5-minute short reels or stories that but also they might see society differently than when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really thought, hey, I want to be a flight attendant and I want to do this and this and that. I did. So it's different than 12 years ago, but they're also perhaps, if I speak from experience, like they didn't want to take part in my class because I thought of something fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
They were there to learn their profession because I was a teacher at a vocational education, so English wasn't for them a big thing. So they wanted to become a programmer,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't know. It's we teach. I was thinking when you asked me to do this, I was thinking like, what do we really do in our education system? And basically, we're teaching them to, we're giving them the knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to work, to work at a job. Like we're raising them and we're educating them to become an employee somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So is that like the basic knowledge or the basic skills, like how to do your taxes, for example?
Mm-hmm.
We don't teach that in school.
Yeah,
So,
it's an interesting one.
Yeah, but it is essential for them to learn like how to do taxes, like how to save money or even work with money, or how to cook. I mean, basic skills that in a way you learn at home, but not everyone has that privilege.
Yeah.
To yeah.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. And you seem so strong in your drive and in your motivation and in your goal. And did you always know that you wanted to study education, or how did you decide to study education? Do you remember this point?
Yeah, actually it started off because I did vocational education myself, and it was in
Okay.
the branch, which was entirely different than being a teacher. But I was also thinking like, okay, if I'm 40, do I still want to do this when I'm 40? And I was like, no, I don't want to do this when I'm 40 years old and working as a waitress in a restaurant. So
Yeah. Okay.
then I thought, okay, what can I do? And I was like,
Mhm.
I'm good at English. So
Yeah.
let's do English teacher.
That's a good realization. Well, what am I good at? What can I do? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. So I was good at English, and I was like, okay, I can try to do this. And during
Mhm.
my first year in the teacher school at the University of Applied Sciences in Utrecht, during my first year, I had an internship which was at a low level, like students with low level in secondary school. It's like
Okay.
pre-vocation, and
Okay.
I loved it. I mean, the kids were so honest and they were so interested in me as a teacher, but also like very bold and they wanted to learn. So
Okay.
that really got me going. Like, this is something that I can do, and this is something that I can be good at.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I never really stopped, teaching.
No, that's great. And just for some of our international listeners, Hanya, you said that you were teaching at the lower level of school. Do you mind
Yeah.
just giving a brief explanation to what that means?
Yeah, so in the Dutch education system, it's kind of complex. We don't work with like fourth grade and seventh grade like
Mm-hmm.
I think the American system is pretty much well known. So in the Dutch educational system, you go to primary education from the age of 4 to 12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, the Dutch education system is built on tracking, like ability tracking.
Okay.
So basically, that means that they they group students in a classroom or school based on their ability. Like they do tests every year, like CITO tests.
Yeah.
So they group students. So after primary education, they give an advice like, okay, you did the test, the CITO test,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the level that you're at. So based on that level, you're either put in a pre-vocational secondary education, which is
Okay.
from, we call that VMBO basiskader.
Mm-hmm.
Or you're put, and if you are put in like the VMBO, the basiskader, you can then go after after 4 years, you can go on to an intermediate vocational education.
Okay.
So if you're after primary education, if you're at HAVO level, so that means general secondary education, you can go after 5 years when you're 16, 17. Then you can go to the higher vocational education. So that basically means the University of.
Okay.
But if you put like in a higher level, so that's a pre-university secondary education, and that takes a bit longer. That's from 12 to 18 years, and then you the university, like to
Okay.
get your, yeah.
Okay. So that is 3 levels as far as I can hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
within those levels, you have several other levels.
Yeah. Okay. And you were then teaching in, sort to say, the lowest level. I don't enjoy using that term, but how are you explaining it here?
Yeah, I like it as well, but it's the only way how I can explain it. But
Yeah.
there is a debate going on to change like high, low.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. And what is that debate about? Why would that make sense to change, do you think?
Well, I myself did FAMEO, which wasn't the lowest level possible because that's LVO. But if I take a look back at how I felt, I mean, it is like stigmatized. It is, if you're doing the lowest level, you're dumb. You're not able to learn. You're not to, do something.
Yeah. And that's such a hard stigma in such in that age where you're already insecure, you're already going through so many changes.
Yeah, it is because, but I have always had I didn't see myself as a low-level student. I saw myself as, okay, I just need more time to learn. I just need more time to develop myself and I thrive. So it also made sure that, I'm 34 years old now, that 3 years ago, I decided to get back to study, and I studied educational scientists at university. So it doesn't really matter if you're young and you're doing a university or you're older and doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also okay if you don't want to do that. I mean,
Yeah, definitely.
of course. So,
And sorry.
yeah. So during my internship, I was teaching at the lowest level possible, like a pre-vocational secondary education.
Mm-hmm.
Loved it. So after my studies and when I became an English teacher with my diploma, I started teaching at the vocational, so the intermediate vocational education.
Okay.
So 15 years plus. And I did that for 12 years, actually.
Yeah. And I'm really curious to hear what made you go back to studying after 12 years, because you could also just have continued down that road of working and develop your career and professionally. So what made you go back to studying?
And I hit the limit because I was a mentor, I was a career coach, I was in the exam board, and I did everything possible within the school.
Mm-hmm.
And the next logical step would be like management, but English doesn't change, the language stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, we get new words, but grammar wise it's the same. So
yeah.
I also heard my colleagues like complaining like students change and I can't get them, they're not motivated. And I was like, okay, so what can we do about this?
Yeah.
And I thought educational sciences is something that I could use to make education better.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it because it really made sure my brain was used again in a different way. So I was keen to learn, and I'm still keen to learn, and I'm eager to make sure that it makes sure that I use my brain on a different level now, and I learn new stuff, and I'm also full of ideas like how can we make sure education turns out for the better for our students.
Yeah, definitely. And I can really imagine that it's extremely valuable for a program like educational science that they have someone with experience, because I can imagine that some of your classmates or colleagues, or what to say, do not have the same level of experience as you do. How do you sort of view that, or how does that change maybe their perception?
I think I was one of the oldest one in class.
Yeah, I am as well. I can confirm.
So which isn't a big problem for me. I mean, I'm still having fun and I learn a lot. But the thing that I do get back also from teachers is the way I put theory into practice.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Is something that is beneficial for me, but also for everyone I'm working with.
Yeah, definitely.
I can imagine that if you're 21 and haven't had the work experience I have, it's also difficult. Like, okay, you have all this theory learned, and then you have to, I'm kind of like, I can practice what I preach.
Yeah, and I think also what we've discussed already is that you're mentioning a bit of a turn or a change and saying, well, society is changing, students are changing, so therefore the education has to change. And I guess if you haven't had that practice, that can be difficult to observe and to have much of an opinion on. And that's actually what I'm very curious about is to hear some of the taught practices in education, whether that is sort of the old methods or the new methods that you are talking about, that you really believe in and that you follow, and on the other side, some of the practices in education in the Netherlands that you don't believe in or don't per se support personally, and therefore try to find a bit alternative methods.
Yeah, so I think that it depends on, like, what I said, we teach them knowledge that makes them ready for a job.
Yeah.
Which is, I understand why we do that, because if you're going for a surgery, you want something skilled and someone who knows what to do, right?
Mm,
But on the other hand,
definitely.
yeah.
Yes. I'll sign up for the experienced one. Yes.
So I think gaining knowledge should happen one way or another.
Yes.
However, it's also something that cannot always be taught in school, right? I
Mm.
mean, in vocational education, they get biology, and then they have to learn the cells, the hearts, like the organisms and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you're not aiming for being a physician or a surgeon or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
Then this is something that is not useful for you at all. I mean, basic
Yeah.
knowledge like how does your heart work, or what is the symptom of a heart attack or whatever. Those things are good to know, but biology for every student, even if you don't want to do anything with that, is that something that we have to aim for, for everyone? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So, learning can also happen at the work floor, It's something that can be taught in school, but I think people learn every day. So the skill and that keenness to learn, wanting to learn becomes much more important. So we don't teach them like the basic knowledge to live in the society as it is. And I think it also comes from experience and learning in practice.
Yeah.
So I don't know, because for example, my daughter is 7. She goes to the 4th group in elementary school.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Mom, I have a spelling test next week." And I was like, "You're 7.
Yeah.
You should enjoy reading or learning words, and also like learning playfully and learning new words." And I don't know. And she was like kind of nervous for this test. Now,
Yeah, I can imagine.
no, babe, don't worry about it. It's just a small test, and you will learn every day. So don't worry about it. But I do know like some parents are very nervous for the CETO test because they get it like at the age of 4 they get CETO tests.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And what is the purpose of this test exactly?
So eventually, like, this is the tracking that I mentioned before. So
Okay.
they track they track and assess where your kid is at what level they are, and where they stand, like in comparison to the average student.
Okay.
So, in the 8th group, so that's the last class of elementary school, they decide to what level you go to. So some parents are very like aimed at that CETO test to make sure that their kid is on the highest level possible, because God forbid they are at a lower level.
Yeah.
So it puts extra pressure on parents, but most definitely on the students.
Definitely. And and you're saying, well, the tests are somehow prohibiting that the students or the kids enjoy the learning process. That's how I understand it from you. So instead of enjoying the learning, enjoying the reading in a playful way, it becomes about the test.
Yeah, exactly. Because sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
So what I'm just trying to say is that instead of focusing on this test, we have to make sure that every kid, it doesn't matter what level they are, they get these small successes, like the belief that they can do it, and they even if it doesn't work out the first time, they can do stuff to make it more better for themselves the next time, not just for the test or to get a higher level or higher grade, but like really have a look at where am I now, and how to get to that, to gaining that knowledge or gaining that experience.
Yeah. And why do you think that is important? Not doing it for the test, but doing it for an internal drive. What does that why is that important to the students when they're still kids, and why is that important once they grow up into professionals?
So imagine you get tests every year, and every year, especially vocational education and secondary education, they get a lot of tests.
Yeah.
Like if you have 10 subjects, you get sometimes 4 tests per subject per year.
Yeah, that's a lot.
So imagine like failing a test, and then you have a resit, failing the resit, and then, you already feel like, and this is an assumption, but I think it's a good assumption because I've once been there, so I speak my own experience that you feel kind of like a failure. You feel, okay, I can't do this. This is too difficult. And I think that if you're learning to how to learn and how to develop yourself, then you can achieve more success later on, because sometimes the only thing you need is someone to believe in you or you to believe in you. And then you can already do it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. No, that makes sense. And how is that executed practically? So I'm curious, because what I get from you is that it's much more about motivating the student to learn and teaching the student to learn. Actually, how do you go about that? Because that's very different from sort of my understanding of a classic school system, which is indeed very test oriented, very assessment oriented. So how does it work in the sort of new philosophy that you're mentioning?
I have no idea how to do this, because the entire Dutch education system is built on grading and tracking. And the same also like other European countries. They also track a lot. So I'm not sure how to. I know I can do this by myself, but I do know that there's a school. It's called Agora, and they are having a pilot.
Okay.
Without giving grades.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's also based on a lot of feedback to students. But it is also time consuming. I mean, you have to take time to give feedback and also learn students like how to interpret that feedback, right? I mean, feedback is just feedback. It doesn't really mean that, it's an interpretation of the teacher of your work, but is it exactly that what you meant? And do you agree with the feedback? That's also something else.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you're mentioning feedback, because I think to our listeners, this term of feedback might be used in this context maybe a bit differently. But I've obviously had these conversations with you before, Hanya, about feedback, and I know that you really emphasize that. And I think maybe if you don't mind just explaining a bit what you mean with feedback in the education system, because I can imagine that for some of our listeners, feedback means here you have your grade and this is why you have it. That is it. So I'm curious if you can explain a bit what you mean when you say feedback.
So feedback is what some people think feedback is the teacher, like if you as a teacher give feedback, what usually happens is that students say, okay, I'm going to change this, and then I'll get a good grade because this is what the teacher sees, and she's going to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Instead of like, and that also comes from the way teachers give feedback, right? That's like detailed, and it has to be like this, not like that. But instead of giving feedback in such a way, we could ask more questions like, okay, for example, you used 2 research methods. Why did you use these research methods? And explain why, because I don't see that in your paper, for example. But it's also the other way around, because the teacher interprets your feedback, your paper, and gives feedback based on what she or he thinks. But as a student, you know what you have written, and sometimes perhaps it's not clear what you have written, but you could also disagree with the feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, feedback is just the way a teacher sees something, but there are several things happening. Like the teacher has to have discussed with at least the students, this is what I think is good quality of work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then they have to
Beforehand, you mean, or
beforehand, yes.
beforehand? Okay.
So before even assessing a paper or a presentation or whatever, you have to discuss with your students, like, if you have a presentation, what makes a good presentation?
Yeah.
And also, like, make sure they are engaged in this decision making. Like, they know what a good presentation is. I know what a presentation is. Can we combine our two requirements together, right?
Okay.
And then they can work on that, and then you already have base, like, okay, this is a good quality of presentation, so we're going to take a look at it like that. And then if you're giving feedback on a presentation, it shouldn't be a surprise that, for example, Mohammed didn't use an introduction, because you already established, like, an introduction is essential to a presentation.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's also like, it's kind of like feedback literacy, right? Because the teacher gives feedback, the student has to understand the feedback. Like, am I really what you're saying to me?
Yeah.
And do I have enough time to make improvements for the next time? So there's always an interaction between either student, if it's peer feedback, or teacher-student. And there's always time to improve yourself one way or another. And there's an understanding. So it's kind of like a cycle.
Yeah. It's interesting. And what immediately pops into my mind as a question is, why wouldn't this have been the way we've always done it? So when you're explaining it like this, it seems so obvious to understand beforehand what the assignment is about, what a good quality paper, a good quality presentation is about. Why do you think that this has not been always the way of doing it? Why would teachers sort of withhold that information till you failed, if I can say it like that, and then give you the feedback saying, well, you didn't make an introduction? Because I have definitely also had these experiences where you go, well, I didn't know I needed an introduction, and then the teacher to some extent almost enjoys that you didn't know, and that is not to put teachers in a vicious perspective, but I am curious to hear maybe your take on why wouldn't it always just be clarified from the beginning?
So I think, and it's kind of like assuming, because I haven't done my research or taken a look at, like, what drives teachers. But if I take a look at, I give a lot of trainings to other teachers at different schools in the Netherlands. So sometimes they're afraid, like, if they give you the list of requirements and how they're going to grade you, kind of scared that it becomes like a box that you can tick off, right? Introduction, check. Content, check. Minutes, check. So they try to teach you, like, the good ways of doing a presentation, and then, oh my god, surprise, you failed this presentation because you didn't have an introduction. So if they teach you the correct way, it shouldn't be a surprise that you got that grade. It should only be a surprise if you didn't do it and then don't have the insight of what you have done. But if you use, like, the way you're grading to make sure you teach your classes, then you make sure students are prepared enough. And feedback is so essential, because just what I said, like, the basic knowledge, the skills, if you want your students to improve themselves, you have to give that feedback. You have to give them to work on their knowledge or their skill gaining and stuff.
And interesting what you say, how grades also play a role, because I'm just thinking out loud here that I think, well, it's a bit as if teachers can set you up for success or almost set you up for failure, in the sense of explaining things to you very clearly up front and be okay with you using that information and therefore get a better result, instead of thinking, well, you're not going to get a better result or a better grade because I gave you that information. That is a bit how I see it, that it becomes a bit of a guessing, almost a guessing game, or like, can you guess what you need to do? And then if you can't, then you get a lower grade.
Yeah, but it's kind of like, in educational terms, we say constructive alignment. So
Okay. Constructive alignment.
yeah, so that
Okay.
basically means that the learning objective is on par with the testing, but also the learning activities in class. So
Okay.
if your learning objective is not clear, then the students won't know like how you will test them. Like, how can they make sure you see what they have learned?
Yeah.
And sometimes we tend to, make fun classes like a Kahoot here and a quiz there. But then we forget the learning objective. Like, why do we do these fun stuff? And do they learn something other than it's fun to do?
Yeah.
So with grades, grading is we're making sure that our students are performing. It's like teach to the test instead of like teach to learn.
Yeah. Could you, I'm just throwing out a tough question here. Could you take out grading altogether? Do you believe that you could build an education system completely free of a grade system?
There's actually an elementary school, we call it Vrije School. It's a free school. So students, they just do what they like to do. It's kind of like freedom, but within certain limits.
Okay.
And they can do it whenever they want to, and they have like core objectives. And they don't do grading. So yeah, it is possible, but at the end they still, I think also other schools outside of Europe, they also give grades. So it's something that we find important, but at the same time, is it important enough? I don't know.
No, and it's a very interesting topic. And now you mention yourself, Hanya, that other European countries, they also tend to use a grading system, and sort of looking at other nations, other cultures. Are there any practices within education that you think maybe the Dutch system could learn from?
The Dutch system. Well, it's kind of different. I don't know a lot of educational systems outside of Europe. I know that China is super strict. Like, they are so strict in school that they even move at the same time.
Okay. They move at the same time.
Yeah, because my brother-in-law, he was a teacher in China for a short time. So whenever he stood up, all students simultaneously stood up.
Okay.
Like, there's a level of respect, of course, but also the drive to, it is so strict. You have to do it like this. There's no other way to do that. And if you falls out of this, then you're not taking part of this. So I think that's a bit too extreme.
Okay. That's a bit the other side of the spectrum, I guess, of where you want to go at.
Yeah. So I don't know really. I'm not that into other educational systems, but
no, fair enough.
The ones I do know are also built on grades.
Yeah. I'm also not sure I know of an entire education system that isn't built on grades. I think obviously the program in which we have met, so the Young Innovator program, which was sort of an honor program next to our master programs, that was not built on grades, and that has been such an interesting way for me to learn, and in many ways, for me, it has sort of opened up a bit ways of learning, or reopened, maybe is a better term, because I think I've always enjoyed to learn, and I've always had a drive for studying and for education. I've been what they call a nerd. I am what they call a nerd. And I think somewhere along the way, I've tend to lose it a bit, because it is so because education is so based on strict rules and grades and meeting other people's expectations, that for me, the Young Innovator program where we met has given me the drive again to learn in my spare time.
Yeah.
And also learn without having to perform, and not having to learn to master. And I think that was also what we've discussed a lot, for me, very important to realize that you can learn a new skill, you can read about a new topic, can try out a new sport without having to have the goal of mastering it. And that's also maybe a bit related, maybe not, to the grading of doing it to as close to perfection as possible.
Yeah, definitely, because the honors program was, what it brought me was that I saw myself in a different light, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was indeed no pressure. You could discover parts of your own person that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise.
Yeah.
Like, what do I really want to do? Like, what is still fun? And
Mm-hmm.
If we take away the pressure from performing, like, what is it that you're really interested to do?
Indeed. Yeah.
And that was, but that's an exception to like the entire university system in the Netherlands. I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's
It was a little bubble.
yeah, it was really a bubble. And also, I know the first time we came there, it was like, okay, I'm in a cult right now.
Yeah. we were bonding over that.
Yeah, exactly. So, and in the end, I was part of that little cult of you know, I just call it now misfits, but it was like people. I wouldn't have got to know everyone there if I didn't do this honors program. But it was nice to just do something outside of, you know, writing papers, scientific stuff.
Yeah.
Also discovering like what does spark my interest, and what parts of myself, even though I'm 34 years old, I can learn from.
Always, definitely.
Yeah, and also be appreciative of everything we have achieved so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think because my colleagues, they have a program in Suriname, and that's a very small country, but there's also, they want to make sure that children, I don't want to call it the bush, but it's like they don't have that eagerness to go to school, but also the way they are in their society, it's good enough, so they don't need school. So do we need to force them to go to school when they are like, they're happy, they're living, they're learning? So is the school system, the way we have built that, is that the norm? And should it be the norm?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I don't know why it takes me a bit to a debate that has been going on in Denmark a lot. So I have a couple of family members in education as well, so elementary school teachers, and often during family gatherings, I get to hear a lot of the stories there. And something that keeps coming up is this thing of what is supposed to be taught by the parent and what is supposed to be taught by the teacher. And there you also see a switch. That reminds me a bit of what you're saying. Well, if society is already teaching you enough for you to go on about your life being happy and having a sense of value, what does the school give that you don't already get? And that's a very sort of a complex situation, and I'm not sure what is best, but it is an interesting debate because there seems to be a switch as well, because parents work a lot, that there are certain discipline areas that used to be taught by parents that we now see the teachers are supposed to take over. And on the other hand, the learning of the sort of the material learning that used to be performed by the teacher is to a greater extent performed by the parent. And what I mean with that is, for example, before sending your kids to school, already when they're 4 or 5 years old, that they have to have learned certain things from home, a little bit of reading and so forth. I don't know if this trend is also seen in the Netherlands.
It is definitely a discussion that is going on.
Okay.
But also,
interesting.
When we were kids, then if I had a bad grade, then I would have a talk with my parents. But now, if you have a bad grade, the parent goes to the teacher, like, what happened?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's very, very concisely explained. I used a lot of words for it, but that's exactly, that's it.
Yeah.
That's an interesting switch.
I do agree that but it's also because I know that not all children have the same privilege of having parents to read, make sure time to read with your kid, or talk about sex education, or like how to defend yourself, or how to talk, how to communicate.
Yeah.
Because it is something that other parents can do, but you also have parents who are not that involved. And then what? Who will teach you that? So in a way, I do agree that in a certain amount and extent, a parent has to teach their kids to, do taxes, how to communicate, how to send a correct email, or to pick up a telephone. But on the other hand, I work a lot too. So my daughter is at school from 8:30 till 2 a week. So sometimes the teacher sees her more than me on a day. So in a way, I think that it's not bad to have that in school. And there should also be, like, the way the parents discipline their child, that should be, that should happen at home.
Okay.
But the way there's so much at school, so why shouldn't you teach them?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a complex topic, isn't it? Very much
complex, yeah. But also because I know that not every child has a parent at home who takes the time.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point.
Yeah, you get that gap,
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
And so thank you a lot, Hanya, for explaining and sharing your experiences and your opinions on this matter. It's very insightful. I want to end with a question that is on how your students can help you and can support you in becoming the best version of yourself as a teacher, because we've obviously discussed a lot about your role and your responsibilities, and I'm very curious to hear what you would sort of give of 2 to 3 tips on what students can do to bring the best out for their teachers.
I think that they can, first, being themselves. Like, don't be someone else, or don't pretend to be something else. Be yourself, be your fun, quirky, crazy little self. And talk to yeah, talk to your teacher. I mean, we cannot know what you feel or think, so talk.
Mm-hmm.
And know that whatever it is you do, there's no good or wrong. There's only development and, that eagerness to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes they're a bit too worried. I think the best thing as a teacher is that you have students in front of you who think, okay, I can learn something from you.
Yeah.
But that also that they have to open up themselves and give that teacher the chance to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
But I would also add, like, the other way around as a teacher, what they can do to support their students. Is that okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The best advice I would give my fellow teachers, and that's why I was such a good mentor, if I say so myself.
You can. You may.
You listen to your students. Like, what are they saying? Like, not just because they look differently or because there's another Damien in the class who is such a naughty boy, but really talk with them. It shouldn't always be about the subject you're teaching, just showing interest in them, or even if it's 10 minutes of your time, like how was your weekend? What did you do? Make sure you're interested.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is give them the feeling of being capable. They need the little successes to achieve big successes.
Yeah. Definitely. That was a beautiful way of ending it. Very beautiful way. Yes, they need the little successes.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay. Thanks a lot, Hanya.
Welcome.
For taking the time and sharing so many of your insightful experiences. It has been a great talk. Of course.
I can talk hours.
Me too. So that's why I have to stop it.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Terima kasih Warga Budaya for listening and for being curious. I am super curious to hear your thoughts on today's broadcast, so please share how this broadcast on education resonated with you. I beforehand apologize for any misperceptions or misrepresentations that might have occurred. The intention is obviously always to be mindful and respectful. So nothing left to say, but have a great night. Sampai jumpa di siaran berikutnya. Bye-bye.
Dari Komplek Balai Budaya Minomartani Ngaglik Sleman. Inilah Radio BBM. Jaringan Radio Komunitas Yogyakarta.
Terima kasih. Anda sedang mendengarkan Radio Komunitas BBM FM 107,7 MHz.
Dipancarkan dari kawasan Balai Budaya Minomartani, Radio Komunitas BBM FM.